Good evening, everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the truth about hair loss and natural hair care. And many of you joined us for part one just a few weeks ago. And Dr. Kendrick and Susan Peterkin Bishop were gracious enough to come back and join us again tonight to answer many of the questions that we did not get to. So those of you who were here for part one, welcome back. And those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. Thank you for joining us via Zoom, Facebook Live, telephone. We have people from all over the globe tonight who have registered to be with us. So we are just so excited to be with you for this hour. If you have questions and you're joining us via Zoom, please type them in the chat and we will try our very best to get to your questions. And the same thing for Facebook Live. We have someone monitoring our chat and Facebook Live, and we have received many questions, as you can imagine, via email that we will definitely get to. It is my distinct pleasure and honor to welcome back Dr. Kendrick. Dr. Kendrick is a native of Los Angeles, a graduate of University of Cincinnati, and she completed her residency right here in Washington, D.C. at Howard University. And she is the owner and CEO of Kendrick Hair and Skin Center in Columbia, Maryland. Dr. Kendrick?
Hi, all. Professor Brown, thank you for having me back.
You are so welcome. Thank you for joining us. And Susan Peterkin Bishop, who hails from Jamaica and New York with over 35 years in the hair industry. She is a licensed senior cosmetologist, the owner of Jaha Hair Studios in partnership with Peter Kendrick at Hair and Scalp Wellness in Columbia, Maryland. Please welcome Susan.
Hi, hello.
Hey,
Hi,
hey.
Professor Brown. Thank you for having me back. Looking forward to the conversation.
Pleasure. It's my pleasure. So ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna get right to it. I just want to recap for you how I happened to meet what I call the dream team. So this is just a brief summary from part one. In August of last year, I noticed that my hair was thinning. I went to a sorority event, and this is the picture on the left, the far left, and I noticed that my hair was thinning. And then I went to the hair salon and I was told that I had these bald spots. So this picture that you see here, these pictures on the far left are from August of 2019. Unfortunately, like a lot of us when we have medical conditions, and Dr. Kendrick will remind us that hair loss is a medical condition. And unfortunately, a lot of us are misdiagnosed. We don't get to the right doctors. They may not have the right expertise. Or what I've learned from Dr. Kendrick, well, they may not go about things the right way. And you'll find out later on when she comes back on why a biopsy is key. Well, I ended up going to Dr. Kendrick right before the COVID-19 quarantine started. And my first meeting with her was via telemedicine. And she diagnosed me with a condition called CCCA just by looking at pictures and having conversations with me. But there were certain treatments that we could not start until I was able to get back into the office when she reopened to go through the process of having a biopsy. And ladies and gentlemen, you will not believe I was mortified. I have two different types of alopecia. So Doc realized that we had to be very aggressive in my treatment because one of them had already shown up, the CCCA. The second one, which we'll talk about later, is FFA. That one has not shown up, and that's where you have the receding hairline. And one thing that I love about Dr. Kendrick's model, she is the only doctor, only board certified dermatologist in the world that has a licensed senior cosmetologist that she is in collaboration with in her physical building. So the first thing that I said to her, now, Doc, you telling me that I have this problem, I need to know how I'm gonna walk around all day long looking fabulous, because I like to look fabulous. I like to look nice. So she said, you need to call Susan. So I hung up, I called Susan within 30 seconds, and we began the process of making my hair healthy in terms of styling and daily hair care. Doc handled the medical portion. And so the pictures to the right show the progression in just 3 months of I no longer have the hair thinning. If you look to the far right, the bald spot has closed tremendously. And I stand on these two principles. My people are destroyed from a lack of knowledge. So when we don't know what to do, we cannot get solutions. And as a trio, we are adamant that particularly people of color deserve the same treatment and the same outcomes. So I am here tonight to bring them to you. I'm gonna stop talking and I'm gonna turn it over to Doc and Susan. And also I just wanna read this quote: change can create beautiful things. Embrace it and realize all of the possibilities it has to offer. I had to change my hair practices, but I was relieved to know that this condition is hereditary. I mean, I wasn't happy that it's hereditary, but I was happy to know that it wasn't something that I did, but moreover, that there are solutions to alopecia. So I'm gonna turn the floor over to Dr. Kendrick and Susan, and they're gonna talk to you about 3 different types of alopecia, and I'm gonna come back during the Q&A. Doc and Susan.
Thank you. So as she said, I'm Dr. Kendrick, and we went over this pretty thoroughly in part 1. So I'm going to take this time to just kind of, jiggle your memories so that we have a lot more time for question and answers. So firstly, CCCA, central centrifugal cicatricial alopecia. That's where inflammation is attacking your follicles with the purpose of destroying it. It's genetic, so there's nothing you did to cause it, and there's nothing you could have done to prevent it. You can do things to worsen it, such as tight braids and relaxers. And think of it as, if it's not babying your hair, then it's going to worsen your CCCA. CCCA requires a lot. We need to neutralize the inflammation. We do it with injections, topicals, and pills. Sometimes we need to refreshen the damaged follicles, and we do that through 2 different forms of platelet-rich plasma. And only when everything is stable can we even think about hair transplantation. Traction alopecia, that's the form of hair loss that is 100% preventable. That's the picture at the bottom left. You see that zone of, some people will call it baby hairs, but that's actually the original hairline, followed by the zone of hair loss, followed by the new hairline. The only thing that produces that pattern of 3 is traction alopecia, and it's because, as what Susan says, our culture is obsessed with neat edges. We need to make it okay to not have neat edges because it's literally causing a disease. And finally, androgenetic alopecia, which is also called female pattern or male pattern hair loss or baldness. This is where your own hormone, your own testosterone, is destined to shrink the follicles. So if you look at your follicles as being as important to your hair as a root is to a plant, if you have a damaged, withered root, that's the type of hair that will grow. Hopefully that jogs your memory. I really am keeping this short very intentionally to ensure that we can really get to the questions and answers, and I'm open to reviewing anything specific that you guys request.
Susan, you want to add anything?
Just want to add, Dr. K said it before, that the CCC and female pattern baldness, definitely it's hereditary, and it's nothing, your immune is not caused by any hairstyling, but traction alopecia is. But with both of those 2, CCC and female pattern baldness, you can make it worse by certain hairstyles. So, you kind of have to kind of step it back. And, I always say less is more when you're dealing with that hair loss, so that the medical side and the wellness side that I provide, the hairstyling, can come together so you can get the maximum results.
Okay. So let's transition to the question and answer. And the first question that we received via email, and I'm just going to read them to both of you and you can answer however you like. Are there ways to bring your edges back after years of braids?
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So in that case, the key is coming as early as possible. So if you recognize it, don't delay. The question digs deep into whether or not the damage was permanent or not. So if the damage was not permanent, and especially if it's mild, we start with a topical. Usually I start with minoxidil, 12%. So minoxidil might sound familiar to you guys. Minoxidil 2% and 5% is found in Rogaine, Carinique, and Nioxin. The reason why I don't want you to run out and buy any form of minoxidil is because it can lock you in for the rest of your life, unless you have traction alopecia. If you have traction alopecia, then you can just use until your edges come in. We also, if it's inflamed, use injections to neutralize the inflammation. But my favorite way to treat traction alopecia is with platelet-rich plasma, where we're using chemicals found in your body that just repair stuff. When you cut yourself, your platelets form the clot so you don't bleed to death. And then those same platelets release chemicals into the cut to trigger your wound healing process. And that's why you don't require all your scabs for the rest of your life. When we take those chemicals, those growth factors, and inject it or use a laser and then massage it into the scalp, then we can repair the follicles. Done. But if the damage from traction alopecia is permanent, then we need to do hair transplantation. And that's where we take nice, healthy, strong follicles from the back of your scalp and implant them in areas where it's just smooth bald and there's no follicle. So one way or another, we can get your edges back, but we want to do it in a nice, orderly process.
Okay. The next question, which I think may overlap with the first one, are there any procedures that can reverse traction alopecia? Now, this question doesn't refer to a particular area in the scalp. So I guess we can go with this one. Are there any procedures that can reverse traction alopecia?
Yeah, so you're right. So it was the two procedures I mentioned. That's the platelet-rich plasma, where I'm using the growth factors to refresh the follicle, or hair transplantation, where we're kind of moving them around.
Okay. Some of my sister locks fell out at the crown of my head. How do I stimulate the hair follicles to make my hair come back?
I like that she recognizes that they fell out. I have a lot of patients where for the first 2, 3, 4 inches of their scalp, there's like one lock. And they think that the lock did not fall out. And I had to say, sis, it went somewhere. So when that happens, that means the problem is at the roots. There's a possibility they're being locked too tight, but I highly, highly, highly suspect that you actually have a form of hair loss. So before we start spitting out treatments, we have to remember, we have to back up. We always start with the diagnosis. Which of the 15 types of hair loss do you have? Then I know which lane we're in and I can lay out all the specific treatments.
And Doc, can you talk about that? Can you talk about the consultation process when we come in for the first time?
So for me, I take hair loss very seriously. When you come in, we're only talking about hair loss. While I'm treating your acne, you're not going to tell me, oh, by the way, doc, I have hair loss, and then we're addressing it. We reschedule. During your hair loss consultation, I don't want to see that rash. You need another appointment. So that's very specific. You tell me the story. How did it start? Who first noticed it? Do you have symptoms? How is it affecting your life? What treatments have you had? I evaluate your scalp. And I usually, between those two things, the history you tell me and your physical exam, I can usually narrow it down to 1 or 2 of the 15 types of hair loss. Then I literally take out a sheet of paper and a pen, and I'm drawing out a normal follicle, Then I draw out the actual disease process so that you can see it. See, people learn one of three ways: visual, kinetic, or auditory. So I'm trying to hit you at every point. Then I literally write down all of the treatment options and categorize them. Some people are like things from a bird's eye view. Some people like nitty gritty details. So I try to cover both. So the bird's eye view, the treatments fall under growth, wellness, neutralizing inflammation if it's an inflammatory form of hair loss, and repair. So under growth, it's usually the same three things, and that's one form of minoxidil or another. There's 2 vitamins that actually work for hair loss, and biotin is not one of them. And then the shampoo we carry in the office. Under wellness, I consider everything that Susan does in the salon in Peter Kendra Hair and Scalp Wellness Center to be a part of wellness, because it's talking about the health of your hair. I'm a dermatologist. I have no interest in doing hair, right? I got Susan on top of that. Next thing, hair checks. We calculate the density of your hair with the device. I don't want to wait until I can see with my own eyes that you're worsening, right? I want the calculations to tell me you're worsening before we can see it. And then discussion groups. We used to have discussion groups, but we canceled them because of COVID-19. So that was a growth category, wellness category, inflammation. So if you have inflammation and it's say FFA, we're going straight to the big gun, which is a pill called hydroxychloroquine. This is the same medication that your president lied about and said cure COVID. And for a second, my patients had difficulty finding it, but now we all know like it doesn't work. And so that was a wasted effort, a waste of time. But then sometimes injections, you have inflammation that's deep, sometimes just a topical, because you can take care of the inflammation at home with an ointment. And then usually we're prescribing an anti-inflammatory pill that stops the disease from spreading. And then the final category, aside from growth, wellness, and neutralizing inflammation, is repair. And those are the 2 procedures that I mentioned: the platelet-rich plasma, either from drawing your blood and using it, or using the laser, and hair transplantation. So we do all of that first. And this sheet that I drew out, we call it the map. And it is your responsibility to hold on to this map. I don't know if you're ever going to find another doctor that whips out a piece of paper and just lays it all out. I'll tell you one thing, I'm not going to draw it again. So make sure you guys hold on to it.
I'm gonna hold on to mine, Doc.
Right. And then I explain the biopsy. And usually the plan is the next step is the biopsy. I'll always tell you what step we're on and what the next one is. When you come back for your biopsy results, you bring that map, and then you and I sit there and design your plan. 6 months later, we have a powwow. You bring that map, and we adjust your plan based on how the disease and your hair and the scalp is responding. It's very thorough. And sometimes y'all get a little upset with my receptionist when she says our next appointment isn't until December. But can you imagine how much time it takes up to do that? But I think it's worth it. I think you guys will find that thorough of a hair loss consultation makes a huge difference in the long run.
It definitely does. And I know from the experience of being misdiagnosed, so I know that it makes a difference. Susan, are natural oils good or even needed for the scalp?
Some can. Since I've been with Dr. Kendra, I've had an oil that I've been using for years, and it had rosemary in there. And I've always known that rosemary is good for your scalp, but it shouldn't be the only option. You shouldn't look the oils first. As I'm gonna piggyback on what she said. Definitely should get your diagnosis first. But if you have the traction alopecia, and it's it's not as bad, and there's a lot of information, that you can use some type of natural oil with rosemary in there. You know what I mean? So you have to know the percentage of rosemary oil that goes in, because I've had clients who have put a little concoction together and has ended up burning their scalp because they have so much like peppermint and tea tree and all this, you know, the 100% essential oil, and they didn't dilute it in a carrier oil like say almond oil or something like that. So you have to know how to use your natural essential oils. So I would either do a research or even come to a dermatologist like Dr. Kendra who knows about the oil, and then talk to someone like me also who into oils and say, well, you know, because sometimes I have some of the clients who have some oils and I said, what did you have much? And they have a really good mixture. And I was like, continue to use it along with your other treatments.
Okay, great. This young lady says, I have FFA. How can we slow down this scarring alopecia?
Okay, so I assume that you have a dermatologist and they probably already put you on hydroxychloroquine. We do injections every month for 6 months. I usually add minoxidil pills and the shampoo and the vitamins. In other words, you see me throwing everything at FFA. FFA is a diagnosis that keeps me humble. It's the hardest one to treat. And it's really because medicine, the field of medicine, has not caught up to what our patients with FFA needs. I just happen to be the chair of the dermatology section for the National Medical Association. So for those of us that are hair geeks, we're starting to collaborate and figure out the best way to carry out some of these studies. And we're talking with pharmaceutical companies because they've been pretty much ignoring FFA. And the reason is it's rare, right? They much rather bring out another medication for high blood pressure because it's so prevalent, they'll make a whole lot more money off. But hopefully that long game will eventually work for you. Now, once the FFA is under control, that's when we whip out platelet-rich plasma. And there's an old way that I did PRP, and that's when I would, you know, draw your blood and inject it back in. And I was very happy with those results, right? I'm not complaining about it at all, but this laser PRP is much better. We're seeing faster results and greater growth with it. So it will be in that order. You want to maximize your medical treatment, the hydroxychloroquine, minoxidil, the vitamins, shampoo, get your injections, get the inflammation under control, and then in 6 months, move over to platelet-rich plasma.
Okay. Nicole, do we have any questions in the chat?
Actually, Tanya, we do not have any questions in the chat at this moment. So hopefully if anyone out there has a question, they'll be happy to put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll keep going. Why, oh, this is a great question. Why does my hairstylist need to work with a dermatologist?
Well, as a senior licensed cosmetologist, I say everyone has a lane that they need to stay within that lane so that they, in the situation where you don't overstep your qualifications, right? As a senior licensed cosmetologist, I have taken classes with 2 dermatologists. I've taken classes with Dr. Yolanda Lenzi, and then I'm in the office with Dr. Kendra, where I learn every day. There's not one day that I go in that I don't learn something, you know, from her and from hearing her speaking. And if you don't know as a cosmetologist to spot certain type of hair loss, you won't know to send your client to a dermatologist. Now, it's good for the cosmetologist to know what the dermatologist does so that they can be like the backup and, you know, reassure their clients. But if they don't know, then they'll start making mistakes and using over-the-counter stuff. And when I say over-the-counter, stuff that we get from the hair shows or things that other hairstylists tell us works, and by the time it would have been too late. Like, I would say like 80% of the clients that I see who have like really severe hair loss has a regular stylist that they've been going to. Number one, the stylists sometimes are scared to tell the client that they have hair loss, so they keep it quiet. Number two, they're unsure themselves, or they're gonna lose the client, so they say nothing. Or number three, they're thinking about losing their money, but then they're not thinking about the client. So we have to be, confident enough, learn enough so that we feel that we can send our clients to a dermatologist and make sure we keep that relationship so that the client can come back and forth to us and that we can make sure it's a whole wellness, medical and wellness treatment together so that the client can benefit.
Awesome. That's awesome. And Doc, what would you add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad she asked the question, and I need everyone to keep asking that question until there's no longer a need to ask that question. I can tell you from a physician's point of view, it's such a weird question. You know, endocrinologists, there's no question that an endocrinologist work with a dietitian for their diabetic patients. There's no question that an orthopedic surgeon or sports medicine doctor should work with a physical therapist for their knee replacement patients, right? Like it's such a natural partnership, but I find in the world of alopecia, you'll literally have some hairstylists that for one reason or another don't want their patient's disease treated by a doctor. It's such a weird thing. And we are never, none of us, I do not know a single dermatologist who at this time practices cosmetology, right? And we look at stylists as partners. And one day I will never need to say this again, but it's still the case where dermatologists and hairstylists are partners that don't talk to each other, right? Like it's the only field I can think of where a natural partnership actually is looked at like competition, but they're so parallel and it's so complementary. So hopefully we can just keep asking that question until there's no need to ask that question ever again.
Absolutely. I think this is an overlap question. I see in the chat, I've used topicals and had shots in my bald spots starting over 20 years ago. I've since stopped. Nothing has ever grown, not even peach fuzz. What actions can I take?
If she could respond with what her diagnosis is, then I can tell her.
Okay. All right. Nicole, you ready to take the next question in the chat?
Yes, we have a question here from Barbara Burrows. This is what type of shampoo? And my daughter takes medroxyprogesterone, and I think it is the cause of the continued hair loss. What can she take in place of that will not have hair loss side effects?
Excellent question. So the hair loss could either be from the medroxyprogesterone or for the reason that she needs to take the medroxyprogesterone. For her privacy, I won't ask what that particular diagnosis is. So it could be from either end, the disease or the treatment, which is kind of unfair. But the shampoo you want, ketoconazole at the pharmacy does work, but it's not safe in black hair. It breaks it off, it damages it, and it dries it out too severely. So you end up having to get a zinc pyrithione shampoo. And I had a girlfriend of mine who's a dermatologist sit down and talk with Procter & Gamble about Head and Shoulders, because Head and Shoulders has zinc pyrithione shampoo, 1% in it, but P&G kept putting that particular ingredient in a shampoo that was still too damaging for our hair. So what came out of that conversation between them and my girlfriend was Royal Oils. So you want the shampoo by Royal Oils. I know the ingredient, I don't remember what they named it, you guys, but it's zinc pyrithione 1%. And they intentionally made that for black hair. And we intentionally were like, don't call it black nothing, skin of color nothing, right? Like we wanted it to be like a really good name. Aside from that, for my patients, they get the shampoo in my office, which is zinc pyrithione 2%. And that, doubling the dose makes a greater difference. But over the counter, any zinc pyrithione 1% is not too harsh in your hair.
Thank you, Doc. Doc, going back to the young lady who said that the bald spots happened over 20 years ago. She was getting the injections and nothing happened. And her condition you asked, and she typed in the chat, is CCCA.
Okay, so if it's CCCA, once a follicle goes dormant, meaning the follicle exists, but it's not making a hair, the clock starts. It starts tick-tocking. We have 1 to 2 years to save that dormant follicle before we've lost it forever. So what I'm unsure of is, are some of those follicles completely gone? We've lost them. Or did you save them because you were getting treatments? Either way, I will assume that you're not symptomatic, meaning you don't have the signs of inflammation such as itching, not related to scarring, tingling, burning, tenderness, soreness, or outright pain in your scalp. If you have any of those symptoms, your inflammation is not under control, and that's step 1, because the inflammation is how the damage is occurring. The inflammation is what is destroying the follicle. If your inflammation is under control, I would go directly to PRP and then possibly hair transplantation. Because what I don't want is that CCCA to spread to the back where you have those nice healthy hairs. And we could have used those to fill in some of the gaps. So step 1, get it under control. Step 2, get either PRP or hair transplantation.
And this leads to the next question that's in the Q&A. Can you please briefly summarize again the process for PRP?
Okay, so there's 2. One is we draw your blood. We leave behind your red and white blood cells and use the broth of your blood, which is plasma, because we want your platelets. Platelets contain chemicals that trigger healing in the body called growth factors. We inject those growth factors into the scalp. We'll call that one the blood PRP. That's 3 treatments, 6 weeks apart to repair the damaged follicles. And then we do 1 treatment twice a year to maintain our progress. The new PRPs where we use a laser, we run the laser over your scalp. It makes your scalp for about 5 minutes, instead of keeping everything out, it'll absorb anything in, it'll act like a sponge. Then we take growth factors from a lab that are 1,500 times more potent than normal and massage that into your scalp. That's 2 treatments a month for 3 months. And then maintenance is either 1 or 2 treatments twice a year.
Wow, that's awesome, Dr. Kendrick. Susan, this young lady is interested in styling techniques for 4C hair that camouflages edges. And then she says, do locks weaken or further damage edges?
Well, let me take the locks part first. It depends on what kind of twisting technique that is being done. Usually when my clients have been diagnosed with any type of hair loss and they have locks, I usually stop the twisting for a while and just treat their scalp, along with the medical treatment, and give the hair a rest. If the locks is too long, I suggest that we, cut some of the length off to get rid of some of the weight. That's for locks. Definitely you want to, when you're styling your hair for hair loss, and it's hard to get into the 4C, because as a licensed cosmetologist, we don't speak in those terms. Those are like terms that DIYers did. We speak in terms of density, porosity, elasticity, stuff like that. That's how we, and your texture curl pattern, that's how we speak. So it's kind of hard, because you might think that you have what you call 4C, which is kind of almost negative right now. And your hair might not even be what you think it is. So I would say if your edges are thinning, then you're going to try to get a style that you're not constantly pulling your hair back off your face. Or even if you do that, it's maybe for one evening where you're going out, but then most of the time you wear it down. Let's say you're wearing a wig. Instead of doing your flat twist or cornrows going all the way back, you can part it to come around. Another thing that I truly believe that gel has now become the new relaxer. And if you have thinning edges, you should stop using gels because they further clog up the pores. And if you're putting any kind of, medication, topicals on it, then it won't work as well. So we need to get away from the gel, any kind of hairstyle. You don't want a hairstyle that's going to stay put for 24 hours because they have a gel called 48-hour gel. Like why? I don't know. Why we need a gel, to slick down for 48 hours. Those kind of things will make the situation worse. So you want to get away from the tight styles or a style that stays one place all the time.
Okay, and a bit of an overlap, but it wasn't specifically stated like this. Can we use olive oil and coconut oil for our hair and scalp?
No, there's no proof that olive oil and coconut oil does anything for your edges. If anything, it works more on the ends of your hair because it's more of an emollient. It's too heavy for your scalp. Majority of the time, we as African Americans, we don't really need oil on our scalp. We already produce enough oil. The only time we should use a topical on our scalp is if it was a medication from the dermatologist. Like we have a topical for CCCA. So that's the only time you should use a topical. Otherwise from that, if you have traction alopecia, then you can definitely use, a mixture of the rosemary oil you can use in your ends if your traction alopecia is not as, advanced and you're not using a topical from the dermatologist. Like say, for instance, some of my clients use both. I'll tell them, I said, use the one that you get from the doctor in the mornings because it doesn't have a smell, but the one that I make, you use it at night. So you get kind of, the best of both. You can use both because, some people like both. So I say use that one, but make sure I always tell them the medical prescription always comes before any kind of over-the-counter oil. So no, olive oil and coconut oil on your scalp, definitely not.
Doc, you want to add anything?
Olive oil is what we use when we want to try to grow the yeast that causes dandruff. So we usually recommend don't put olive oil
Yep.
your hair.
Yes.
Oh my.
It
Yep.
thrives.
Wow. I mean,
Yep.
it's truly amazing how we've been so misinformed.
What we're looking at, a lot of this, and it's probably the true source between why dermatologists sometimes can't find a stylist to work with. It's because dermatology was considered a luxury and it simply was not offered to Blacks, right? And if you found a Black dermatologist, they didn't have the opportunity or the privilege to specialize in hair loss. Yeah. And if you found a white dermatologist who did, they either didn't treat Blacks and could just boldly turn you away, or they had no clue how to treat Blacks, right? And even if you have a wonderful non-Black dermatologist that has the best intentions in mind, their residency program did not need to teach them a lick about Black hair, nails, and skin, right? And so we even have some Black dermatologists that have to go and read an extra textbook or a weekend course or come to one of my lectures just to learn about Black hair and skin. And so what happened is, thank God, stylists stood up and took the role as the hair experts in our community, but they didn't have the backs of medicine and research and scientific investigations behind them, right? It's a miracle that they figured out that greasing the scalp would help with seborrheic dermatitis and then all the products that stylists are making that's better for our hair. But the root of it was the hairstylists had to be the experts in the Black community, whereas dermatologists played that role in other communities.
Mm.
So I think
That's
there's
powerful.
I think there's definitely a learning curve, and you have a lot more of us who are realizing that we need to, have that solid partnership with a dermatologist, and still maintain, our standing in the community, and I think that's the scary part. A lot of stylists believe that, that dermatologist is like, taking over. No, we have to realize that hair loss is medical and we are not medical professionals. And that's, if we just keep that in mind, like if you as hairstylists, we can probably have some indication that our clients have high blood pressure or something like that. We wouldn't tell our clients, well, just go take some over the counter oils or do something else, or garlic or something, whatever they said for high blood pressure. No, we're going to tell our clients, no, I really think you should go to the doctor because it sounds like you have high blood pressure or something. Like, because I've had a client who every time she went under the dryer, her head would hurt and she would just get kind of, and I know sometimes when you have high blood pressure, being under the dryer kind of, it stimulates your blood pressure, whatever it is. And I would say, you really should get it checked, because I think maybe your pressure is high or something like that. And, that person came back and she did have high blood pressure. So, as stylists, we can see certain things, but we shouldn't overstep our bounds and then start trying to solve the issue on our own. We have a natural partner in the dermatologist, and we should definitely make sure that that relationship is nurtured and,
Thank you, Susan.
Mhm.
The next question, I've been using Rogaine on my daughter's scalp for over a year and have seen little to no progress. What else can I do?
Ooh, okay. So,
hmm.
start the diagnosis first. What is her diagnosis? Come back and let me know.
Okay. All right. And there are duplicate questions in the chat, but we're coming to the top of the hour, so we're going to close out now. And there's a young lady in the Q&A who said she logged on late. I just got online to talk about the transplant and plasma again, PTP, CCA, and what would be the cost. I also heard that biotin and collagen shampoo and conditioner would help. Please advise.
Okay, I'll do the last one. That's the easiest. Biotin doesn't work. It does not work for hair loss at all. And a couple of things. One, it can cause acne. And two, when you get your blood drawn, biotin interacts with the testing in such a way it makes the results come out incorrect. So you can have a thyroid disease. If you're taking biotin, it'll make the results come out normal. Or you can be perfectly healthy, and if you're taking biotin, it can make it look like you're having a heart attack. So if you had any labs done while you're taking vitamins, let your doctors know so they know which tests to go back and reorder. The first question was it to review PRP again and hair transplantation? Was that the question?
And CCCA.
And CCCA. Okay. So CCCA is the most common form of hair loss in Blacks. It's caused by a gene that's passed down through every generation. And it seems to get worse with each generation. It's a form of hair loss that typically starts at the center of the scalp and it gradually spreads, and that inflammation destroys the follicle, ultimately leading to permanent scarring. Hair transplantation is where we're taking nice, healthy follicles, usually from the back of your scalp, and we take the follicles out one group at a time. And usually there's 1, 2, or 3 hairs coming out of each follicle. And we put it in the areas of hair loss. But the key, if the question is really about CCCA and hair transplantation, the key is only doing hair transplantation after the inflammation is under control, because otherwise that inflammation will come in right behind us and destroy everything that we did.
And lastly, what is the cost for these treatments?
Okay, let's see. So minoxidil pills, $10 for a month's supply. The topical is about $20 for a month's supply. The vitamins, there's only 2 that works. So, and they know, those companies know that there are only 2. So they charge $80 for a month's supply. And then the injections, the prescriptions is usually covered by your insurance. The shampoo is about $25. Now to the real deal, and that's the procedures. PRP, if it's the one where we draw your blood, in our office in Maryland, we charge $1,100 per treatment, and you have to start off with 3. If you don't get those first 3, I wouldn't bother. The other PRP, the laser one, right now we charge $650 per treatment. And that one is 2 treatments a month for 3 months. But that's just the introductory price. That laser PRP is not new to me, it's new to the entire world. That's why it's discounted, but it will be $800 per treatment once I feel like I've learned, you know, all I can learn, which is probably going to be for the next couple of months.
Okay, and this is the person that came on late, and they said something was mentioned about royal oils.
Yeah, they have a zinc pyrithione. So I had, I literally grabbed Procter & Gamble, our point of contact, and grabbed my girlfriend and had them sit down at a table and talk about ingredients because we needed a dandruff shampoo, needed a zinc pyrithione shampoo that wouldn't damage our hair. And what came out of that was royal oils. I cannot remember the name of the zinc pyrithione shampoo, but it should be within the royal oils line. And they basically revamped the entire line to be more appropriate for our hair.
Thank you, Dr. Kendrick. And Susan, we'll close out the last question with you. It's a bit of an overlap, but there is a new question. What oil should we put in our hair? Do you recommend the LOC method after washing?
Yes, I definitely recommend the LOC method after washing, but you have to think about your own hair texture, your elasticity, your density, you know, your porosity. So someone with a very, you know, soft curl pattern with more finer hair, you're going to stay away from the heavy creams. You're going to have maybe a lighter leave-in conditioner. Make sure that your leave-in conditioner has or your cream has a slip to it. I always say do the skin test, like rub your leave-in conditioner, lotion or cream on your hand, and if it stays very slippery like an emollient for a while, you know it's going to do the same thing. But if it starts drying out almost like a dry lotion, then you know it's going to do the same thing on top of your hair. It's going to leave that powdery film on your hair, making your hair look dull. So you always want to try that. And I would always say start out with less and then build up as you go. And don't put a lot. And do not put leave-in conditioner or lotions directly on your scalp. You know, spray it on your ends, massage it through your ends first, and then you can move up with it. So you're not having a lot on your scalp. As I said, most of us produce enough oil on our scalps. We don't need a lot of things on our scalp. So definitely, I do recommend LOC. As far as oils, I was like lighter oils. I'm going to say this to you. If you're going to use an oil on your scalp, make sure it's a light oil and it moves like water. My favorite is almond oil. Apricot kernel oil is good. What other oil? They have a few. As I said, if it's very light and it moves like water, then that's a really, really good oil for you. The reason why I didn't like coconut oil is because you put it in and at a certain temperature, it tends to solidify. You don't want it to do that on your hair, on your scalp. I mean, you don't want it to do that. So that's why I don't like the coconut oil. And as Dr. Kendrick said, you know, the olive oil, you know, and we learned that also it can cause buildup of yeast, and because they use that to actually grow yeast. So the lighter the oil, it moves like water. If you turn your bottle upside down, the oil is taking a long time to run down. That oil can probably be used on the ends of your hair, but not close to your scalp.
Thank you, Susan. At this point, we're going to transition to, me saying thank you to Dr. Kendrick and Susan for coming back this evening and answering these very, very important questions. I learn so much every time I sit with you, whether it's in the office, getting my injections or getting my hair styled by Susan. I'm just fascinated by the wealth of knowledge that I have gained with you. So I am from you. So I'm so thankful for the opportunity to share your expertise with our audience tonight. And thank you for those of you who joined us via Zoom, via Facebook Live and phone. I hope that you will come back next week. As I just mentioned, Dr. Kendrick and Susan kicked off this month for us. Next Thursday, I'll be back here with Howard Ross, who's going to talk about his book, Everyday Bias in Navigating Unconscious Judgment. And here's the big question: is unconscious bias, is it hereditary or is it learned? Then on the 20th, I will be interviewing Dorothy Butler Gilliam, who was the first African-American female reporter at the Washington Post. And then we'll close out the month with a very important conversation on caregiving throughout the pandemic with Brittany Kitt from AARP DC. If you want to get in touch with Dr. Kendrick or Susan, their contact information is in the chat. You will also receive it in a thank you email tomorrow for those of you who registered via Zoom. Thank you so much to Millicent and Nicole for monitoring the chat and Facebook Live. God bless you all. Be safe and good night.
Thank you.
Right.
Good night.